The detention facility hummed with the kind of sterile efficiency that suggested someone, somewhere, had filed the correct paperwork for this catastrophically illegal operation. Vrelt Compound Oversight. Administrator Gisitko clicked her mandibles in what her species considered deep concentration, but what most carbon-based life forms interpreted as deeply unsettling. She studied the human through 3 separate layers of reinforced transplas, as if the additional barriers might somehow make the creature less confusing. The metabolic profile suggests extreme vulnerability to Class 7 neurotoxins, Jessica announced, her translator rendering her chittering into flat, bureaucratic Galactic standard. Their cellular structure appears primitive, almost aggressively so. Beside her, the Kithen research specialist, a being of living crystal named Chorus of Midnight Refractions, though most just called him Chorus, hummed a discordant note that rattled the observation equipment. I maintain that psychological approaches would prove more effective. Their cultural matrix shows pronounced social bonding, isolation, perhaps, sensory deprivation. "We tried sensory deprivation on the last one," muttered the third figure in the room, a Hurlon security contractor whose name badge read simply Vex. He was bipedal, mammalian, and currently nursing what he claimed was a stress-induced ulcer. Human sat there for 6 hours making rhythmic sounds with its mouth. Later claimed it was practicing beatbox. We still don't know what that means. The human in question sat in the center of the detention sphere, hands clasped loosely on the metal table before him. He was unremarkable by his species standards. Average height, brown hair going gray at the temples, the kind of weathered face that suggested he'd spent decades squinting at things in poor lighting. His jumpsuit identified him as cargo hauler personnel, 3rd class. His expression identified him as someone deeply, almost spiritually, unimpressed. "Gentlemen, Lady Crystal-based consciousness of indeterminate gender," the human said, his voice carrying through the comm system with infuriating clarity. "We've been at this for, 14 hours? My union's going to have words about the overtime violations." Jisitka's mandibles clacked faster. The subject remains defiant. Recommendation: proceed with chemical intervention protocol. Chorus refracted light in a pattern that suggested doubt. The ethical considerations are filed under Section 7, Subsection 4, Paragraph 89 of the Extra-Legal Detention Procedures Manual, Jistka interrupted. All 27 forms were submitted in triplicate. We are, technically speaking, fully authorized to be unauthorized. Vex rubbed his temple. "I hate this job." "Noted and disregarded," Jistk replied, already manipulating the detention sphere's internal mechanisms. A panel slid open in the table, presenting a crystal vial filled with amber liquid. "Subject will consume the contents. Compliance is not optional." The human leaned forward, squinting at the vial. "What is it?" "A Class 7 neurotoxin derived from the Kelthara vine," Jisik explained, with something approaching pride. "In the concentration provided, it will cause mild neural disruption, disorientation, and significantly increase your willingness to cooperate with our extremely legitimate questioning." "Extremely legitimate," the human repeated, in a tone that suggested he was filing that phrase away for later mockery. He picked up the vial, held it to the light, gave it a small swirl like he was examining wine. "Huh. Smells like... is that alkaloid-based?" Chorus's crystalline structure flickered with surprise. "You can identify molecular composition by scent?" "Buddy, I've hauled cargo through 17 sectors. You learn to identify things that'll kill you." The human uncapped the vial. "Though usually I try to avoid drinking them." "Then you'll cooperate?" Jistik leaned closer to her monitors. "Didn't say that." The human tipped the vial back and drained it in one smooth motion. His face contorted immediately. Not in pain, but in the expression of someone who'd just experienced something profoundly unpleasant. "Oh, that's awful. Tastes like battery acid mixed with regret." "And is that a citrus note? Who thought that was a good idea?" Vex's datapad clattered to the floor. Chorus stopped humming entirely, which for his species was equivalent to a shocked gasp. Zisic's mandibles froze mid-click. "Subject should be experiencing neural cascade within 30 seconds, she said, though her voice had lost its bureaucratic certainty. The human smacked his lips, grimacing. "Experiencing a really bad aftertaste, if that counts. You got any water, or literally anything else? Because wow, that is persistent." "Impossible." Gistic pulled up the toxicology reports, compound structures scrolling across her screens in frantic succession. "The concentration was calculated for your body mass. You should be, at minimum, experiencing severe vertigo." "Oh, I'm experiencing something." The human stood, stretched, rolled his shoulders. "Mostly I'm experiencing disappointment in your hospitality." "I mean, you drag me off my route, hold me in what I'm pretty sure violates at least 6 interstellar treaties, and you can't even provide decent beverages." Chorus finally found his voice, or rather his harmonics. "The Kelthera neurotoxin is lethal to 47 known species. We administered 1/10 the fatal dose." "Well, there's your problem." The human sat back down, apparently unaffected. "You went with 1/10 lethal when you should have asked, 'What's this guy had for breakfast?' Because let me tell you, after 20 years of cargo hauler rations and station coffee, your nervous system builds up some serious tolerance." "Station coffee," Vex repeated slowly, "is a toxin?" "To everyone except humans, apparently." The human grinned. It was not a comforting expression. "You boys want to tell me what you were really hoping to accomplish here?" "Because if this is about the disputed cargo containers from the Theta 7 shipment, I already told you. Those were declared at customs. Not my fault if your scanners couldn't identify pre-packaged foodstuffs." Zistko's mandibles resumed clicking, but faster now, agitated. She brought up the cargo manifest, scanning through items that her equipment had flagged as suspicious. "These compounds, theobromine, capsaicin, ethanol in solution. Chocolate, hot sauce, and cooking wine," the human translated. Basic stuff, though the cooking wine was probably pushing it. That brand's barely fit for human consumption, let alone cooking. "You consume ethanol deliberately?" Chorus's entire crystalline matrix was refracting light in patterns suggesting existential crisis. "As a recreational substance?" "Have you met humans?" The cargo hauler laughed. "We've been fermenting things and drinking the results for thousands of years. It's practically a cultural cornerstone. Weddings, funerals, successful business deals, failed business deals, days ending in Y, all good excuses." Vex was frantically pulling up xenobiological databases, his ulcer apparently forgotten in the face of this revelation. "The files on human neurochemistry are incomplete, heavily redacted. There's a warning here about selective information release pending full diplomatic integration." Translation: "They don't want you knowing about all the weird stuff we can survive," the human offered helpfully. "Probably worried about panic or envy. We're still figuring out how the galaxy feels about us." Zisic's screens were now filled with chemical structures, cross-references, warning labels in multiple languages. "The substance you just consumed? You're certain you're experiencing no adverse effects?" Define adverse. The human considered this. "I mean, my mouth tastes like I licked a battery that was stored in a lemon, but I've had worse. There was this bar on Epsilon Station that served something called a singularity shot. That was adverse. This is just unpleasant." "You're building a tolerance," Chorus said, his harmonics shifting to something like awe. "In real time, your metabolism is adapting to the compound as we observe." "Probably." The human shrugged. Humans are pretty good at that. Evolution on Earth wasn't exactly gentle. If it didn't immediately kill you, you built a resistance and kept going. Sometimes you even developed a taste for it. Gistic looked at her colleagues, then back at the human, then at her meticulously filed authorization forms for illegal detention and chemical experimentation. Somewhere in her insectoid brain, a calculation was occurring, and the result was deeply, profoundly unsettling. "Get me the restricted substance catalog," she said quietly. "All of it. And someone contact Xenobiology Division. I think we may have made a significant error in our assumptions about human vulnerabilities." The human leaned back in his chair, remarkably comfortable for someone who'd just been poisoned. "While you're at it, seriously, any chance of some water? Or coffee, if you've got it? Because if we're going to keep doing this, I'd like something to wash that taste out." "You want more neurotoxins?" Vex asked, his voice climbing an octave. "I want caffeine," the human corrected. "There's a difference." Probably. Chorus of midnight refractions had not slept in 4 cycles. His species didn't technically require sleep. They entered dormant states of reduced luminescence. But right now, dormancy seemed like a luxury reserved for beings who hadn't just discovered their entire understanding of xenobiology was catastrophically incomplete. The archive chamber stretched beyond visual range, crystalline data matrices storing every recorded interaction between the galactic community and the newer species. Earth's section was embarrassingly small, tucked between the Yithran Collective, pleasant, herbivorous, utterly forgettable, and the Zexthari Dominion. Aggressive, quickly quarantined, everyone agreed to pretend they didn't exist. Chorus extended a resonance field into the nearest data crystal. Information flooded his consciousness in ways that would have given organic species migraines. Incident Report 3847. B. Disciplinary action failure species, human, Homo sapiens. Location, mining colony Xerxes 9. Incident, human labor contractor violated 47 safety regulations. Disciplinary protocol, isolation in sensory-neutral chamber for 72 hours. Result, subject emerged humming unfamiliar melodies, claimed to have worked through some personal stuff, and requested extended isolation for meditation purposes. Disciplinary action deemed ineffective. Recommendation, avoid isolation-based punishment. Species demonstrates abnormal comfort with solitude. Chorus moved to another crystal, his light patterns flickering with growing unease. Incident Report 4, 203-J, sleep deprivation. Study species, human, Homo sapiens. Location, contested station Gamma 7. Incident, human transport crew subjected to mandatory 96-hour shift rotation due to emergency protocols. Result, crew synthesized makeshift stimulant from available compounds, later identified as crude caffeine extraction. Performance improved. Energy levels increased. Upon rescue, subjects requested just 5 more minutes to complete additional tasks. Recommendation, sleep deprivation ineffective as deterrent. Species treats exhaustion as inconvenience rather than limitation. "You're going to damage your matrix if you keep this up," Vex said from the chamber entrance. The Hurlon looked worse than before. His fur had developed a stress molt pattern that suggested he'd been reviewing similar files. "Their evolutionary environment," Chorus harmonized, not bothering with pleasantries. "I need access to Earth's geological and biological history." The restricted files. Beisetuan Torst hesitated. "Those require 7 different clearances and a psychiatric evaluation." "I just watched a cargo hauler drink neurotoxin like it was substandard refreshment. My psychiatric state is already questionable. Get me the files." 20 minutes later, Chorus wished he'd remained ignorant. Earth's evolutionary record read like a horror anthology written by a sadistic cosmologist. Ice ages that lasted millennia. volcanic eruptions that blacked out the sun, asteroid impacts that rendered entire continents uninhabitable, predators with neurotoxic venom, plants that produced chemical weapons, microorganisms that turned basic bodily functions into existential threats. And through it all, the ancestral humans, soft, clawless, fangless, apparently defenseless, had simply persisted. They persistence hunted, Chorus said aloud, his harmonics taking on an edge of something approaching fear. They literally chased prey until the prey died of exhaustion. For hours, sometimes days. Vex was reading over his shoulder, his datapad displaying Earth's botanical horrors. These peppers, the capsicum genus, humans deliberately cultivated them to produce higher concentrations of capsaicin, a compound that triggers pain receptors, and then ate them recreationally, for pleasure. There's documentation of competitions, Chorus added, pulling up festival records from various human cultures. They gathered in groups to consume the most painful specimens, awarded prizes for tolerance. A new file emerged from the archives, this one flagged with 17 different warning symbols. Classified report, human recreational toxin consumption. Compiled by Xenobiology Research Division clearance level. Omega summary. Humans demonstrate unprecedented tolerance for substances classified as poisons across 89% of known species. Preliminary list includes ethanol, neurotoxin. Humans ferment organic matter deliberately to produce it. Consumption is culturally significant across all surveyed populations. Theobromine, cardiotoxic alkaloid found in Theobroma cacao. Lethal to canid species, and 34 other biological classifications. Humans process it into chocolate, considered a luxury food item. Caffeine, stimulant alkaloid. Humans extract from multiple plant sources, consume in liquid form daily, experience withdrawal symptoms if deprived, and consider this normal. Capsaicin, chemical irritant designed to deter mammalian consumption. Humans cultivate plants to maximize concentration, then compete to consume the strongest variants. Back in the detention sphere, Xisk was implementing Phase 2 of what was rapidly becoming the worst planned interrogation in galactic history. She'd authorized the dispensation of compounds from the restricted catalog, actual poisons this time, not the introductory level neurotoxin that had failed so spectacularly. The human watched with interest as a servo arm delivered a rack of vials, each labeled in 6 languages with "Nust," increasingly dire warnings. Arsenic derivatives, Xisk announced. Microdose concentrations, sufficient to cause cellular disruption and extreme discomfort. The human selected one, examined it with the same wine-tasting methodology as before, and took a careful sip. His face scrunched. Metallic, earthy undertones, unpleasant finish. He set it down. 3 out of 10, next. This cannot be happening, Xisk muttered, but she was already queuing up the next sample. Botulinum derivative, one of the most toxic biological substances known to galactic science. The human tried it, paused, tried it again. Interesting. There's almost no flavor, but there's this weird numbness. Not great. 2 out of 10, mostly because at least it doesn't taste like battery acid. Vex's voice crackled through Chorus's communicator. Are you seeing this? I'm reviewing why this is possible, Chorus replied, his harmonics strained. Their evolutionary history. Everything on their planet was trying to kill them. Everything. The weather, the geology, the other organisms. They developed adaptation as a survival mechanism, not gradual, generational adaptation. Real-time, individual-level metabolic flexibility. On the monitors, the human was now providing detailed tasting notes on what should have been lethal compounds. This one's got a bitter aftertaste that lingers. That one's almost sweet at first, then turns sour. Oh, this one's just offensive. What is that, sulfur-based? Who designed this? Jessicka's mandibles had stopped clicking entirely. She'd entered a state of bureaucratic shock, where paperwork ceased to matter, and existential dread took over. The interrogation protocols, she said slowly, are based on universal biological vulnerabilities. Which humans apparently don't have, Vex finished. Chorus pulled up one final file, this one marked with a single word in red. Reclassification pending. Species assessment. Update. Homo sapiens previous classification. Developing species. Tier 3 technology. Standard biological parameters. Recommended reclassification. Persistence, predator species. Adaptive metabolism. Extreme environmental tolerance. Notes: initial assessment grossly underestimated species resilience. Earth's hostile evolutionary environment produced organism capable of surviving conditions lethal to majority of known sapient life. Humans did not develop specialized defenses against specific threats. Instead, developed generalized ability to endure, adapt, and metabolize virtually any challenge. They don't overcome obstacles, they outlast them. Further observation required before full integration into galactic community. Current contact protocols may be insufficient. In the detention sphere, the human pushed away the rack of poison samples. Look, this has been educational and all, but I'm developing a tolerance to your entire inventory here. My liver's going to need a vacation after this. Can we maybe skip to the part where you admit this is illegal? Let me go, and we all pretend this never happened. Jessica looked at Vex. Vex looked at Chorus's remote feed. Chorus's light patterns conveyed what organic species might call deeply concerned resignation. Contact the diplomatic corps, Jessica said finally, and the legal department, and possibly a crisis counselor. Which species? Vex asked. All of them. Jessic's mandibles resumed clicking, but slowly now, like a clock winding down. We may have started an incident. The human, oblivious to the bureaucratic panic he'd caused, leaned back and closed his eyes. Wake me when you figure out what you're doing. And seriously, if you find any coffee in your restricted substances catalog, I'll take a cup. This whole experience has been exhausting. The distress beacon reached Human Expeditionary Command approximately 6 hours before anyone at the detention facility realized they'd sent it. This was mostly because Vex, in a moment of panic-induced clarity, had activated it while pretending to file his hourly security report. He'd reasoned, correctly as it turned out, that having a small diplomatic crisis was preferable to whatever cosmic horror awaited when his employers discovered they'd been chemically torturing the wrong species. The response arrived with the kind of efficiency that suggested military readiness married to bureaucratic fury. Commander Okonkwo materialized in the facility's docking bay with a detachment of Marines, 3 lawyers, and a cultural liaison who looked like she'd rather be literally anywhere else. The commander was tall, dark-skinned, and possessed the particular expression of someone who'd been woken up for this nonsense. Explain, she said, not bothering with pleasantries, why my freight hauler's biometric tracker shows exposure to 17 different toxins in the past 24 hours. Jisk, who'd prepared a 17-page statement with appropriate bureaucratic deflection, found her mandibles suddenly uncooperative. There has been a misunderstanding regarding interrogation protocols and species-appropriate. You poisoned him. We administered controlled substances for the purpose of. You poisoned a civilian contractor over a customs dispute. One of the lawyers, a severe-looking woman with gray-streaked hair, stepped forward. Commander, if I may, the detention itself violates the Proxima Accords, the Intersystem Rights Convention, and, I'm just noticing this now, basic standards of sapient decency. The chemical experimentation adds another 6 treaty violations. Fantastic. Commander Okonkwo's smile could have stripped paint. Vex, is it? Take me to him. The detention sphere had been hastily upgraded with additional monitoring equipment, as if observing the human more closely might somehow explain his continued survival. The cargo hauler, still unnamed in any official reports, which was going to cause paperwork nightmares later, was doing push-ups in the corner. 53, 54, 55, he counted, then noticed the new arrivals. Oh, hey, rescue party showed up. 56, 57. Give me a second to finish the set. Commander Okonkwo watched him complete 20 more push-ups with the expression of someone reconsidering every life choice that had led to this moment. Jenkins. Report, Jenkins. Chorus's harmonics crackled with revelation. The subject has a designation. Everyone has a designation, Jenkins said, standing and brushing off his jumpsuit. Mine just happens to be boring. Commander, permission to request formal complaint paperwork? These folks have the galaxy's worst hospitality, and I've been to Regellian truck stops. Granted. Also granted, medical evacuation, hazard pay, and therapy sessions. Okonkwo turned to Gisitke. Now, you're going to explain in small words what possessed you to experiment on my personnel. What followed was less a conversation and more a cascading avalanche of mutual incomprehension. Jisitka attempted to justify the detention based on suspicious cargo. Jenkins explained, with increasing amusement, that the suspicious compounds were grocery items. The lawyers documented everything. The Marines looked increasingly trigger-happy. Let me see if I understand, Okonkwo said eventually. You detained him because his cargo contained substances you classified as restricted. Affirmative, Zistka confirmed. Substances that included chocolate and hot sauce. Chemical weapons by our assessment. Jenkins couldn't contain his laughter anymore. Oh man, this is perfect. You thought I was smuggling weapons-grade candy bars. The theobromine concentration alone, Zisitki began, is enough to make a decent brownie, Jenkins finished. Commander, you remember that care package I mentioned? From my daughter's school fundraiser? That's what triggered this whole thing. Chocolate-covered espresso beans and artisanal ghost pepper salsa. One of the lawyers was typing so fast her fingers blurred. So, to confirm, you imprisoned a human over fundraiser goods that his child's educational institution was selling to raise money for. What was it? New playground equipment, Jenkins supplied helpfully. Swing sets busted. Kids deserve better. The cultural liaison, who'd been silent until now, made a sound somewhere between a laugh and a sob. They tortured him over a school bake sale. In our defense, Vex offered weakly, we didn't know it was a bake sale. That's not a defense, 3 different people shouted simultaneously. Jenkins, thoroughly caffeinated from the accumulated stimulants and clearly enjoying himself now, settled onto the table. You want to know the really funny part? I tried to explain this. Told you it was foodstuffs. Even offered to share. My kid packed extra. You offered to give your captors the evidence, Okonkwo said flatly. Seemed polite. Jenkins shrugged. Plus, the ghost pepper salsa is legitimately good. Artisanal, like I said. Small batch. Won some kind of award at the county fair. Chorus, monitoring remotely, pulled up Earth cultural databases with newfound urgency. County fairs, school fundraisers, care packages, an entire social infrastructure built around sharing food items that would hospitalize most known species. Your young create toxins for recreational exchange, he harmonized, his confusion audible even through the speakers. My kid's 8. She's fundraising, not weaponizing. Jenkins paused. Though I suppose from your perspective, there's not much difference. The senior lawyer cleared her throat. Commander, I'm obligated to inform you that we now have sufficient evidence for a Class A diplomatic incident with potential reparations in the... She checked her tablet. Somewhere between substantial and absolutely ruinous range. Noted. Okonkwo pinched the bridge of her nose. Jistka, Administrator, you have two options. 1. We file formal charges, contact the Galactic Arbitration Council, and you spend the next decade in legal proceedings that will bankrupt your organization and personally. 2. You release Jenkins immediately, provide full documentation of this disaster, and we classify this as a regrettable misunderstanding. Jistk's mandibles clicked in what might have been despair. Option 2. Smart choice. Okonkwo gestured to Jenkins. Get your things. We're leaving. About that. Jenkins stood, stretched, rolled his neck with several unsettling pops. I don't actually have things. You folks confiscated my cargo, remember? Including, and this is important, my daughter's fundraiser goods that I was supposed to deliver to New Beijing Station. The implications settled over the room like a toxic cloud. You want, the cultural liaison said slowly, your contraband returned. My chocolate and hot sauce, yes. Jenkins's smile was pure mischief now. See, I promised I'd deliver it. Made a commitment. Can't let down the swing set fund. One of the Marines snorted, tried to cover it with a cough, failed entirely. Release all confiscated materials, Okonkwo ordered. Immediately. But the regulations, Jistik started. Are about to be revised, the senior lawyer interrupted, already drafting documents on her tablet. Emergency amendment to restricted substance classifications, human-specific exemptions, and, oh, this is going to be fun, mandatory cultural sensitivity training for all detention facility personnel. Vex was already moving towards the cargo storage, grateful for any excuse to leave the room. Jenkins accepted his belongings with exaggerated gratitude, inspecting each item. Ghost pepper salsa, check. Chocolate-covered espresso beans, check. Artisanal coffee blend. Okay, this one I actually bought for myself, but it was next to the fundraiser table, so it counts. He looked up at Jistk. No hard feelings, by the way. You folks were just doing your jobs. Badly, but still. How? Jist asked, her voice barely functional. Are you not angry? Jenkins considered this, genuinely thoughtful. Anger's exhausting. Besides, I got a story out of this that'll kill at the next Haulers Union meeting. That time I got detained for chocolate smuggling and they tried to poison me. That's gold. Commander Okonkwo ushered Jenkins toward the exit, her Marines forming a protective cordon that was probably unnecessary, but symbolically satisfying. Legal will contact you about reparations and compensation. Make it enough for the deluxe swing set, Jenkins called back. Kids deserve the good stuff. As they departed, the cultural liaison paused at the threshold, looking back at Jisitk and Chorus's monitoring station. For what it's worth, you should probably know. Earth just approved humans for independent trade licensing. There's going to be a lot more of them moving through galactic space soon. Carrying their poisons, Jisik said numbly. Carrying their groceries, the liaison corrected. Try to learn the difference. The door sealed behind them, leaving the detention facility in profound silence. Vex spoke first. I'm updating my resume. I'm requesting reassignment, Jisik added. Chorus's harmonics were barely audible. I'm publishing a warning. None of them noticed Jenkins's voice echoing down the corridor, cheerfully explaining to Commander Okonkwo about the proper preparation of ghost pepper salsa and whether spice tolerance could be considered a marketable military skill. The galaxy, they were beginning to realize, had fundamentally misunderstood what humanity brought to the table. It wasn't strength. It wasn't technology. It wasn't even their bizarre capacity to survive things that should absolutely kill them. It was the unsettling realization that humans had survived by treating survival as negotiable, adaptable, and occasionally amusing. The Galactic Trade Commission convened 3 weeks later in emergency session, which was unprecedented for an organization that typically scheduled meetings 14 months in advance. The chamber seated representatives from 47 species, most of whom looked like they'd rather be facing extinction events than the bureaucratic nightmare currently unfolding. Ambassador Talora of the Civan Confederacy called the session to order, her membranous wings fluttering with agitation. "We are here to address the Jenkins incident." Jenkins himself sat in the observer's gallery, eating what appeared to be roasted seeds from a small bag. The crunching noise echoed through the acoustically perfect chamber. "Those are sunflower seeds," whispered a Quellan delegate to his neighbor, cross-referenced with known human agriculture. "Completely harmless." "Everything about them seems harmless until you investigate," the neighbor muttered back. Ambassador Talora projected the revised substance classifications onto the central display. The list scrolled for several minutes. Caffeine, theobromine, capsaicin, ethanol, nicotine, piperine. Each entry now marked with a small earth symbol and the notation, "Human consumption approved, non-toxic to source species." "The economic implications," Talora continued, "are staggering." A Drexian trade minister raised one of his 6 appendages. "Explain." "Humans can safely transport and consume items that require hazardous material protocols for 91% of galactic species. This creates a natural monopoly on substances previously considered too dangerous for regular commerce." The projection shifted to market analysis. Chocolate futures had tripled in value once word spread that humans could move it without specialized containment. Coffee, actual Earth coffee, not the synthetic approximations, was selling for prices that made precious metals look economical. "They're weaponizing their own digestive systems," someone complained from the back. Jenkins raised his hand. "Respectfully, we're just eating breakfast. Not our fault your biology can't handle it." "The human delegation has filed for trade permits," Talora announced, pulling up documents that had clearly been drafted by lawyers who enjoyed watching bureaucracies squirm. "They're requesting authorization to transport and distribute substances currently classified as restricted, toxic, or hazardous across approximately 73 categories." "Denied," several delegates shouted immediately. "On what grounds?" asked the human diplomatic attaché, a woman named Chen, who'd been quietly documenting everything. "Our personnel can handle these materials safely. We meet all transport requirements. The substances are non-toxic to humans and clearly labeled for species-appropriate consumption." "They're dangerous." "To you," Chen corrected. "To us, they're comfort foods." The Drexian minister pulled up consumption statistics. "You're asking permission to distribute items that could kill most of this chamber if improperly handled." "We're asking permission to sell chocolate and coffee," Jenkins interjected, standing now. "Maybe some hot sauce." "Possibly wine. But that's a separate permit application. My daughter's school could franchise their fundraiser galaxy-wide. Do you understand what that means for the swing set budget?" The absurdity of discussing playground equipment in the Galactic Trade Commission was not lost on anyone. Several delegates made sounds that their translators struggled to interpret, but which universally conveyed exasperation. Chen distributed data pads loaded with proposals. "We're prepared to offer training programs, cultural education, species-specific warnings, proper containment procedures for non-human handlers." "You want to teach us how to safely manage your snacks," Talora said. "We want to participate in galactic commerce without being detained for carrying groceries," Chen replied. The Jenkins incident was the 3rd such case this quarter. Detention facilities across 4 sectors have poisoned human personnel, while attempting interrogations based on cargo misidentification. That information landed like a diplomatic bomb. 3rd case? The Quellan delegates' chromatic patterns shifted to alarmed purple. Human resilience makes your standard intimidation tactics backfire spectacularly, Chen explained. We're trying to prevent future misunderstandings, also future lawsuits. The legal department has a betting pool on which sector gets sued next. Ambassador Talora's wings drooped. This body recognizes that humanity's unique biology creates unprecedented commercial opportunities alongside significant safety concerns. However, restricting human trade based on other species' vulnerabilities sets problematic precedents. Meaning, prompted the Drexian, meaning we classify their substances as human-specific consumables, require clear labeling, and let the market sort itself out. Talora sounded tired. Denying permits would violate free trade agreements. Approving them creates a luxury goods market where humans control distribution of items most species can't touch. Jenkins crunched another sunflower seed. Could just admit that Earth's ecosystem was metal as hell, and we survived it. Not complicated. It's extremely complicated, Talora countered. Your species turns poisons into recreational beverages and considers chemical burns from food a feature rather than a flaw. Builds character, Jenkins offered. Chen projected financial forecasts. Coffee exports alone could shift economic power structures. Chocolate production facilities were being bid on by investors who'd never tasted the product and physically couldn't. Wine aged in Earth's gravity and atmospheric conditions commanded premiums that made Gistic's legal fees look reasonable. You're not just trading commodities, a delegate observed. You're selling access to experiences we can't have. Luxury market thrives on exclusivity, Chen agreed. Humans can deliver authentic Earth experiences. Everyone else gets carefully formulated approximations or accepts the risks. The vote took 18 minutes and resulted in conditional approval. Humans could transport and trade their restricted substances under stringent labeling requirements, species compatibility warnings, and mandatory insurance policies that made Chen's legal team very wealthy. Jenkins received his trade license on the spot, along with an official apology from Gistic's organization that came with enough financial compensation to fund 17 swing sets and a new school library. One last thing, Jenkins said as the session adjourned. He pulled out the artisanal ghost pepper salsa that had started everything. Anyone want to try some? Fair warning, it's got a kick. The chamber emptied in under 30 seconds. 6 months later, Jenkins Freight Solutions operated shipping routes through 9 sectors, specializing in human consumables. His daughter's school fundraiser had expanded into a non-profit supporting educational initiatives across 3 colonies. Chocolate became the unofficial currency of diplomatic gift-giving. Coffee bars appeared on every major station, staffed exclusively by humans who found steady employment in the galaxy's newest luxury industry. Gistka retired to academic research, publishing extensively on the dangers of assumption-based xenobiology. Vex opened a consulting firm, advising detention facilities on species-appropriate interrogation techniques. Chorus became humanity's unlikely advocate. His papers on human resilience required reading for anyone working in interspecies relations. And somewhere in the depths of space, a cargo hauler moved between stations, his holds filled with substances that could kill most sapient life, labeled clearly and legally, while he snacked on chocolate-covered espresso beans and contemplated which Earth delicacy to introduce to the galaxy next. The Swing Set Fund, after all, was still accepting donations.